When it comes to investing, retirement, taxes, healthcare, and estate planning, the decisions you make today can greatly affect the quality of life for you and your loved ones tomorrow. What you need is straight and unbiased information on the most important issues you'll face when planning for your retirement and financial future. Good news, you found Premier Retirement Radio with Jeff Hogan. Jeff is the founder of Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management, and he's been guiding people financially and into retirement for 30 years. So get ready for an hour of the most comprehensive financial information on the radio. Premier Retirement with Jeff Hogan. And now here's Jeff Hogan and Jeff Shea.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Premier Retirement with Jeff Hogan, the radio show that gives you the straight talk and honest answers you need to help you reach your wealth management and retirement goals through smart investing and careful planning. My name is Jeff Shea, and as always, I'm just here to ask the questions, but you know the words of wisdom and solid advice that come from Jeff Hogan, founder and president of Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management. Hey, Jeff, how you doing today?
Doing great. Always great to be here with you and the listeners and have another rant session about how manipulated this market is, what the Fed's doing, what they're not doing, what this election crap's going on. The Olympics, oh geez.
Yeah, have you watched any of the Olympics at all? I haven't really watched it.
A little bit. You know, I was really intrigued by the Simone Biles comeback, in the Olympics, given that she had such a struggle last time and that she took 2 years off, came back. She seems like a whole new person. I love the story. I love just how good she is. And, anybody that excels at the level that she does is just crazy good. It's just phenomenal to watch people that can do things that no one on the planet can do. And that's why I watch the Olympics, is to see these anomaly athletes that just do stuff that is beyond belief and description, setting world records and stuff. I mean, this new swimmer that's blowing Michael Phelps away. Of course, Michael Phelps is a coach, so the French guy. So that was a fun story. And to watch Michael Phelps, give him his medal when he broke the record was cool. That wasn't this time, but that was, in prior races. But it's fun to just see new records being made and people doing things. So, I'm watching a little bit. I was, really kind of shocked, like many people were, about the trans depiction of Leonardo da Vinci's painting. Well, excuse me, what's that painting about? It really has more of a theme than just a Leonardo da Vinci painting. Paintings back in that era were all about religion. And I think it was kind of a slap in the face to most people. I think if they did that to a Muslim religion, they'd all be dead. So, Christians at least turn the other cheek and say, oh, well, it's offensive, but let's move on and, get over it, I guess. But I was surprised that, I don't know, whatever the Olympic Committee would have thought that was cool. Yeah. But whatever. I guess, France is kind of the edgy town that, or Paris especially, but, France in general is a town that kind of pushes the envelope on a lot of areas. So it didn't surprise me that they had some of this stuff that was, you just kind of wonder what angle they're coming at. I think it was just more for shock value and for, just to push the envelope and do things that got attention and were talked about and will always be remembered. And I think that is one of those things that will always be remembered, not necessarily for the cool thing that it was, but it certainly was interesting to say the least. I thought it was cool to have the boats on the Seine River and all that kind of thing. It was a quite amazing opening ceremony, notwithstanding the weird stuff. But, hey, it is what it is. I'm there to watch the athletes. I'm not going to, get too bent out of shape over, people doing stupid things. That's their right to be stupid and depict things in an offensive way, and we either have a right to get offended or not get offended. I think some people are making a little bigger deal about it. And not that it didn't offend me, but, I can choose to let it ruin my day or not. I'm going to still watch the athlete. But I haven't watched too much. There's only a couple things here and there that I'll pop in and check in on. But it's fun to see the world's best get together and compete. Yeah,
well, it's a little tough when it happens in the middle of the day like this, too. But it is what it is. It beats the summer reruns, and certainly it does beat, I think, afternoon television in general. So the Olympics, interesting at this time of the year. But let's talk about what's happening in the United States right now. In case the people have not heard, there's this presidential election thing that's happening, and it's been rather tumultuous so far. President Biden is bowing out, so I wanted to start off this segment by talking about what a Kamala Harris presidency would mean if you plan to retire in 2025. Would you say that Harris really is not going to steer too far away from Biden's policies as far as taxes and the economy goes?
I think she's going to steer farther left. I think she's going to go down the hill way beyond what Biden and his puppeteers have orchestrated. I think if you look at her reputation, her past, and look at clips and read things that she's said, and watch interviews that she's done. I mean, she wants to drive us off the cliff when it comes to anything that's taxable and socialism. I mean, she's totally leans that way. Free health care. She wants all the illegal immigrants we can't call them, I have to call them undocumented
You can't say that.
foreigners or something like that. It'll be undocumented workers. Oh, yeah, no, they give them green cards as soon as they say they're here and they claim asylum. She wants to put them all on Medicare and Social Security, and she basically wants to spend money. But, politicians that have never worked in a real job, like in the private sector and actually had to earn money and run a business, find it, I think, and this is my take, is they find it easy to spend money that they don't have to work for. They just think that it's, it's government money. It's just in the pot. We have it here to spend and do whatever we want. They don't say, oh, gee, how can we be good stewards of this money? Let's, these people work hard for it. Let's treat it with kindness and respect. They say, oh, great. What kind of agenda can we push forward on this? And since it's like free money, it's like, Santa Claus comes to town and drops a bag of money. They get to spend it on all their friends and their wish list. And it doesn't really go back to make the economy better. I mean, creating jobs is not giving out work permits to illegal or undocumented aliens, so they can go get jobs. Creating an economy isn't government spending on more benefits that don't do anything. All the money that they spend on everything from solar companies that have never worked out. They've dumped money down the tubes on electric charging stations for electric cars, and they don't build them, and there's billions gone. We throw money at, wars that shouldn't happen, and, we're financing Ukraine and all this other kind of stuff. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't help them, but where's that money going? There's no accountability to how they spend our money. And that's what I think is going to only get worse. It's bad enough in the Biden administration, but I don't think Harris knows how to put the reins on financial matters. I don't think she's a good leader. If you look at anything she's done, she's never really been a leader at anything, and she talks like an idiot. So, I don't know that she can actually hold that position. I don't know if the Democrats are putting her out there to let her fail before the election so they can put somebody else in. The people like Gavin Newsom and other people have kind of been, showing their face like, hi, I'm over here, and I don't know, what that's about, if they're trying to just support their party or if I think they're riding position, which I think is more likely it. He's a relative of Pelosi and the rich families of California, and pretend that just because they've got money and wealth and been put in positions of power that they somehow have the capacity to lead and take America to a new level to make it better. But all they are doing is tearing it out, raping it, pillaging it, and doing what the Roman Empire did, and that is just basically use the pawns and the peasants and the serfs of the community to work and supply their decadent needs and wishes and desires. And I don't mean that just from a moral standpoint, but I think it's just their spending habits and their just the free for all that they seem to do with money. So, when it comes to Kamala Harris, I think she is more liberal than Biden. I think she's more of a Bernie Sanders, maybe even further left than him. And that's my take of what I've gathered from not only what I've seen, but also I actually have some friends that knew her in Sacramento when they worked together in the State Department, and knew of her kind of rise to fame and fortune and how she got there, and kind of interesting story there. I won't go into details, but it's just weird how she's even there. And obviously she wouldn't be pulling the strings anyway, but I think she would be totally on the bandwagon to the Green New Deal, let's just spend ourselves into oblivion and not worry about the consequences. I can't see taxes not going up. I'm sure she would probably try to, make the Fed print more money and to not worry about inflation, because inflation doesn't matter if you're going to just give all the people you like welfare anyway and just take it from the people that are struggling and working. They think it's more or less the Robin Hood scenario, steal from the rich, give to the poor, but they're biting off the hand that feeds them when they hurt businesses and hurt individuals with taxes and inflation by bad fiscal policy. And that's what they've been known to do. I hope that, they can't manipulate. I know the polls come in saying that, it's kind of a 40-60 split maybe, in the election. But, it really comes down to states. So many states vote party-wise and are going to be red or blue regardless. And then there's those swing states that, we found out in last election can be possibly manipulated. If you look at, statistical probabilities, things that happened can't legitimately happen with real world math. The probabilities just really aren't there to happen what happened. And, call me an election denier or not, not necessarily election denier. I think there was an election, but I think it was manipulated or not done quite right. And I think we need to focus on making sure it's right. So if, in fact, there are some shenanigans again in those swing states, I think the race might be a little closer than we think, and it might not just be a shoe-in win for Trump. However, to flip the coin, if Trump gets in, I think the taxes will continue to be extended. I think he'll pull in the reins on, a lot of the government regulations. He'll probably loosen those up. That's not a bad thing when it comes to allowing businesses to work in a free society and have free competition. If you look at all the biggest companies, it's funny because the Democrats say, oh, Republicans are all about business and, taking from the little guy. Well, who are the biggest liberals on the planet president? Well, president of Apple, president of Amazon, Jeff Bezos. You've got Mark Zuckerberg. You've got Bill Gates, Microsoft, NVIDIA. Don't know really his political leanings, but he's part of the big problem. Tesla, well, he kind of made a change. So we've got very little representation on, the right side of the aisle when it comes to big business and the Magnificent Seven, the huge companies that run the world, especially those that have the ability to censor, like Amazon. Well, not Amazon so much, but yeah, they do. But particularly Google and Meta, Facebook. Apple can get their fingers in it. Microsoft, who knows what their nefarious designs are behind the scenes. I think Bill Gates doesn't know he's evil, but I think he has a lot of evil designs that are to control the population and control people and to make the powerful more powerful. I don't think that's a benevolent type of a person. I think that's more of an evil-eating person. I hate to say that, but I'm calling it out like I see it, as I usually do every week. So, we've got the backing by the biggest companies that have the ability to control a lot of our lives, and the Democrats that want to stay in power, and them working together can make the race a lot closer than we think. And, who knows, maybe even surprise us again. I hope not. I hope that, we learned our lessons last time and we can keep a better eye on, how votes are counted, how votes are taken, who gets to vote. It just blows my mind that in Arizona, because the county recorder's screaming and yelling about how we should make sure everybody gets to register to vote. And even as long as they're, they got 2 feet planted on Arizona soil, they get to vote. Well, I'll tell you what, Arizona's a border town, and there are, I don't know what part of the population is not legally here, or certainly not citizens, because they're still either working on that in a legal manner or they're illegally here. And if they get to vote, that certainly skews things, because who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for the one that gives them the free phone cards, free Medicare, free food, free debit cards every month for living expenses. What else they get? Social Security even, they never put in. That's kind of the agenda on the left, is to take care of these people that are so-called here for asylum, but all they have to do is say they're here for asylum. They get a work permit. They get to compete for our jobs. They get to take money out of the economy. Not most, but maybe most. A lot of that doesn't even stay here in the country. It goes to feed their families back home. And, I do the same thing if I were them, if it was that easy. But, we know how they're going to vote. I think there is a process to become a citizen, and I think they should do that. I know we're getting really deviated from the first question, but I think when we talk about all these things, it all comes back to, what a Harris presidency, if she were to take the lead and somehow win the election, I don't think things are going to get any better. In fact, I'm positive they're going to get worse than they are. I mean, we haven't seen anything but, struggles happening to the middle class. The rich are getting richer because they're pumping money through banks into the stock market, manipulating things. It looks like the market's finally, they're talking, it's in a bubble. Yeah, it's about time you admit it. It has been a bubble, and bubbles always pop. But how is this bubble being created? It's been created by, a lot of manipulation and orchestration behind the scenes, where it's only hurt the middle class and the lower class person, to where now they have to reach out and get a hand from the government. And, that's really what, one party likes to do, and the other party likes to, help everybody have a hand up to get a chance to make a living, rather than get a chance to just, have things given to them. So we have to look at the agendas of, just what the platform of each party stands for, first of all, and also just look at the track record. The track record lately has not been good. It's been going the wrong direction, and I hope we can turn it around. I hope we can flip it. And, we'll see what happens. It's coming up. It's very interesting to see how this thing's all materializing. I think, we're going to learn a lot more about Kamala Harris if she ever starts talking or even looking like she makes sense. It might be interesting. But I think it's funny how they're rewriting her history and changing things that she did or didn't do into things that are so-called, great leadership experiences that have changed the world in some favorable way. And I just don't see it. I hope the rest of the American people that, really do make a difference in this country to make it better will see that and look the other way and not buy into the stories, because I think that's pretty much what we're hearing right now.
We're talking with Jeff Hogan of Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management here in Tucson and Mesa about the upcoming election and what it would mean if you're planning to retire in 2025 if Kamala Harris does become president. I think the biggest thing that would happen would be the removal of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. What would we be losing if that does go away?
Well, I think, I think to get back to more of a focus on what those specifics are, if Harris would win, or if Trump doesn't get a second run at trying to at least stop the bleeding and try to fix or at least soften the landing. I don't think we're going to have a soft landing regardless. I think the story about no landing or soft landing is just a fantasy. The Fed keeps making up stories, pretending like, they're going to lower interest rates and the economy's going to get better as soon as they do. Well, guess what? Lowering interest rates a couple of points is not going to help, Starbucks start actually having earnings when their earnings this last week was announced, 8% down from last year. You've got all the basically consumer discretionary stuff is getting beat up. Even the tech companies are coming in with lower earnings. So if we're not making money, we just can't support this fake market that much longer. So I think we have to beware if you are going to retire. The specifics are, going forward, regardless of who wins, we need to realize that we're in a bubble. Be sure you're not taking risks that you can't afford to take. But what will happen, I think, differently than what Trump will do and kind of get us kind of through the maze probably a little bit better, because he does have some business acumen that most presidents don't have, or anybody who's been a politician for life doesn't have, especially Harris. But if Harris wins, I think it's just going to be money printing and inflation getting out of control again. But I don't think it's going to necessarily prop the market up. There's only so much you can do with all this, fake money. Maybe they can push it up again, but all it does is it just makes the bubble bigger, and it's going to pop harder. So there's going to be trouble ahead. I think if you're retired, you need to be really careful about looking at where the market is right now. Take profits. Make sure that no matter what happens in this next election, that you're prepared in a way where you don't lose money, or you don't have to spend money or live on money that's related to a market that could explode and blow up anytime. People say, I'm a doom and gloomer. No, I've seen history. In history, every so often, there's a market crash. We're due for one. We've got a bubble. It's going to happen. I don't know when. I'm not even going to try to prophesy or tell when. We'll see it happen when it happens. But the more they go up and the more exciting it gets for like the tech stocks, those are typically ones that, when the bubble pops, they're the ones that fall harder. There's an article about gravity is like, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of gravity, right? When you were young, you thought you were afraid of heights. No. You're afraid of what gravity does. It pulls you down, and it's a hard landing. The higher you go, the worse gravity affects you. And gravity comes back to affect the market. It will affect the market. And when we finally get to the top of fall off the peak of our market and hit the ground, if it's a higher market, it's going to hurt more when we finally land. But the fact is we go through cycles. These things are going to happen. Every time in history, the Fed or anybody who said, we're going to have a soft landing, if the word soft landing has been uttered, they're acknowledging the fact that we have recessionary data in front of us. And we have tons of it, more than probably any other recession I can remember, at least during my lifetime. I've been doing this over 35, almost 40 years now, been related to the financial industry. And I haven't seen so many factors that are pointing to bubbles and recessions as I see all at the same time right now. I just don't remember as many graphs pointing to a bad ending. So, it's going to eventually happen. It can only be propped up so long. And I don't think which president comes in is going to stop it from happening. I think it depends on who the president is how hard it will be, or how not so hard it will be, or how easy it might seem. But the bottom line is you can't afford, even when the economy's good, you can't afford to lose money if you're in retirement, if you need that money to live on. So, keep that in mind. If you've got tons of money and you've got tons of time to wait and you've got 20 or 30 years and you don't really care what happens, okay, well, let's just not worry about the next market crash, because you've got unlimited time to have those investments come back. But I do think that there's going to be a correction, again, regardless of, we can call it what happens in a Harris presidency. I will say taxes will remain high. The tax cuts that Trump implemented, 8 years ago are going to go away. Taxes will probably go up. There'll probably be some surcharges on anybody they think is rich. Maybe the Medicare premiums will go higher than they are for different income categories like they do now already, but those might be extended. I think the Social Security tax might be higher in order to try to save Social Security, rather than to save it with tax cuts and extra business, so that businesses and employers do better, so that their contributions to Social Security make up the difference. I think it's just going to be probably on the Harris side would be more likely just an extra tax to solve the problem, which will actually hurt businesses, hurt the consumer, and somehow try to save a program that can't be saved that way. It has to be saved by growth in income. I mean, the revenues of Social Security have to be more than the outflow. And the only way they can be more than the outflow is either raise taxes, which is easy math, and politicians usually do it that way, or it's, hey, let's create better economy. Let's get GDP back up more than 1 or 2%. Right now, it's 2.5%. They think that's a robust economy. Shoot, it's all government spending. I think the deficit spending is more than that, which is a joke, which means we're still at a negative. GDP is not growing, other than the fact that we've got inflation and government spending that makes it look like we've got an economy. Well, the government doesn't generate anything. They just spend our money. All the money that they spend and call GDP was generated by business owners and workers and people that actually create something and provide a service that makes the world in this country a better place. So again, there's going to probably be continued higher inflation. I think gas is still going to be bad because they're pushing this green agenda and they hate oil or whatever. Trump, I think, will make us energy independent again. If that goes down, I think we might actually see some of that inflation that's already taken place. go away over time. I don't think that'll happen with Harris. Taxes will go down with Trump, meaning we'll probably be able to spend stuff on discretionary stuff and buy bicycles and cars and, lazy boy chairs and some of those things that are totally discretionary and that we only buy when we have extra money. I think that, those stocks are getting hurt right now because there's not a lot of extra money. So I think that'll just be more of the same, probably escalated to a level that is going to hurt more Americans, especially the middle class. And especially, I hate to say it, but, my kids are struggling just with the higher cost trying to raise families. I think they're going to be the ones that get hit harder. I think most retirees, if they don't lose their money by making bad decisions and taking too much risk in the market, will probably weather the storm. There's only a couple people in a household that has to spend money. Inflation doesn't affect it as much as, say, the young family that has 5 kids, like my oldest daughter, and trying to make ends meet. And this inflation has taken a big toll on their family. But again, it's we'll see what happens. We already know the history of one party opposed to the other. We know what life was like, even in the midst of COVID and some of the crap that happened under the Trump presidency. We were a lot better positioned as a country to weather the economic storms and the things that came and went. However, the extra printing of money, because it was suggested that we had to give everybody bailouts that supposedly stayed home or keep people on unemployment longer so they wouldn't be incentivized to get a job. Some of those things were really negative for the economy, and they did take place not just during the Trump economy. It took place before that too. There was already stimulus programs and free money handouts and so forth, and under Biden, even more of that. So hopefully we've got to cut that back, let America work on its own. I think the market system, the free market system, does work if we just let it play out. If people want to work and put effort in, the world will be a great place. If they just want to hand out, then I guess they're going to vote the Biden and Harris and that agenda in, and the world will be a different place, and pretty soon people will just stop being incentivized to work and will become the Roman Empire and fail.
Jeff, as you said before, there's about a 40% chance, or at least that was what was published, that Kamala Harris would become president. How do we hedge against that if there is any chance that she will occupy the White House?
Well, I think it's the same as what you would do anyway. I mean, I'm a big proponent of tax planning. I mean, nobody likes to pay more taxes than they legally have to. I believe taxes will stay up and probably go up. So the more money that you can create in a retirement income stream, especially if we're focusing on retirement planning like we do here. And, if you're retired, we want to keep you retired. And if you haven't retired yet, we want to make sure you get there. Don't lose the money right before your retirement and end up having to work an extra 5 or 10 years beyond what you expected. But, manage risk. You have to manage risk either way. You also, I think, should reduce taxes. You can do that by doing Roth conversions, paying taxes now. We've got this year and next year under the current Trump Tax Reduction Act that gives us a lot of room to play to move assets, pay taxes now at either a 22 or a 24% tax bracket. That'll be in a 25 or a 28 tax bracket, when those tax cuts go away. And I'm sure they'll go away if, Harris or anybody in their party, if it isn't her, ends up taking the White House again. But, I think most people just assume, no, it won't. Trump's assassination attempt got a lot of attention. He looked like a leader emerging from that, and it got a lot of hype. But you know what? The election's still a couple months away. It's not right around the corner. Harris is still kind of making her way. They're still trying to paint a picture that she's the right person for the job. I don't know if they'll get a chance to do that or not. So there's still a lot of room to see what happens between now and November. But I think the big focus is income planning. Make sure that you have some buffer. There will probably be inflation coming. I mean, in a big way, continued inflation. I think they'll probably overdo tax cuts to try to save the market and try to lower interest rates, maybe try to increase, the ability for people to buy houses and things like that. But all that'll do is probably push the prices up. I don't think it'll undo the inflation problem that we've had before. I think Trump presidency might help with that a lot more than a Harris presidency by any means. So I think we have to build a buffer in for some inflation. Make sure you save as much as you can in taxes, because that money will be money you can spend instead of hand off to the government. You can spend it your way. I love LERPs. I love Roth conversions. I love charitable planning, depending on the situation. If you're in a really high income bracket, sometimes giving a little bit of money to charity can structure a plan where you can actually get more money and keep it in your pocket, believe it or not. So you can be charitable and actually selfish at the same time in simplistic terms. The other thing is you can pay tax now at a lower rate or pay tax later at a higher rate. But I think tax planning is probably the biggest focus that I'm working on right now, because, I know those taxes, even if Trump gets reelected, we don't know that, those tax laws that are in place sunset. It might be smart to let them sunset and work on other economic stimulus programs. Nobody knows except what's already on the books now. We have to plan around that, but we also have to be suspect that, if you're worried about taxes and you're in a high income, I think that's really where you ought to focus.
We're talking with Jeff Ogan of Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management. If Jeff's comments resonate with you, you'd like to get in and sit down and talk to him about your journey, towards a confident retirement. Again, we're offering this retirement roadmap, casual conversation between you and Jeff to ask the questions that you need the answers to. No cost, no obligation whatsoever. The number for you to call, 520-780-9059. 520-780-9059. Phone lines are open right now. It is the weekend. Just leave your name, telephone number, as Shelley will call you back during the week and set up that appointment for you. Again, no cost, no obligation whatsoever for this casual conversation. 520-780-9059. You can also find out more about us online at premret.com, premret.com. Jeff, time for a break. When we come back, we've got listener questions and more when Premier Retirement continues right here on 790 KNST, Tucson's most stimulating talk.
You can't start a trip you've never taken without a plan, and you can't start your retirement journey without a comprehensive plan to get there safely. To request your no-cost Premier Retirement Roadmap, call 580-780-9059 or request it online at premret.com. Now back to more Premier Retirement with Jeff Hogan and Jeff Shea.
We so much appreciate you joining us here for Premier Retirement every week here on 790 KNST, Tucson's most stimulating talk. We're here for you for your fiscal fitness, your financial education, and to offer you the opportunity to get in and sit down and talk with Jeff for our retirement roadmap. 520-780-9059 is our telephone number. 520-780-9059 if you want to get in and sit down with Jeff. You can also find out more about us online at premret.com. And remember, this initial consultation will not cost you a dime, and there is no obligation. We've had a great conversation in the first part of the show here, Jeff. If our listeners have missed any part of that, remember we're a podcast. Go to wherever you get your podcast, search for Premier Retirement with Jeff Hogan. You'll find this show and many of our past shows so you can stay on top of your journey towards a confident retirement. Okay, Jeff, listener question time. Doug's listening to us in Mesquite Ranch, and Doug says, I have a question about IRMA that I've had trouble finding an answer to anywhere. What exactly gets added to taxable income to determine the modified adjusted gross income for IRMA? Or what exactly is reduced, subtracted from the top line W-2 and 1099 gross income for that IRMA level to see if you get hit with a penalty? First of all, explain IRMA, what he's talking about.
Well, IRMA is basically your Medicare premiums for Part B and D, by the way. Part B and D, Medicare premiums go up with your income. So it's income-related Medicare, basically brackets. So they go by modified adjusted gross income, the MAGI or MAGI. How you get that, to answer that question, is you take your adjusted gross income, which is usually on the front sheet of your tax return, and then you have to add, believe it or not, like tax-exempt interest. Tax-exempt interest that's earned or accrued. So if you haven't actually pulled it out, like municipal bond interest, even if the dividends or the interest might be reinvested in a mutual fund or something like that, if it's got a 1099 that says, hey, you've made this much money, even though it's tax-free, you still have to add that as if it's income. You also have to add, believe it or not, interest from U.S. savings bonds that are used to pay for higher education. That's a bummer. Now, you might get a tax deduction in the final, not the adjusted gross, but your final taxable income might be less because of not having to pay tax on that municipal bond interest or on the tuition or something you might have paid for higher education. But the interest has to go back on your MAGI, which is really kind of dumb to me. Earned income, even if you live abroad, that was maybe excluded from your gross income. Some people live in Puerto Rico, Samoa, Guam, and Northern Mariana Islands, where they have a special tax break where if you live there and spend money there and live less than a certain amount of time here in the U.S., you get to live tax-free. Well, that ends up going back onto your MAGI. So even though it's not included on your adjusted gross income, you would still have to declare it. Now, keep in mind also, when you sell a house, that does come onto your adjusted gross income. You do a Roth conversion and convert. Now, this is kind of a touchy area because you could do some Roth conversions, be in a real aggressive, tax plan and end up having to pay more for your Medicare premiums. Well, that's when you have to kind of weigh, okay, if I pay taxes at 22% right now on $400,000, but my IRMA goes up, $300 a month, and I end up spending $3,000 more this year than I would have, is that still worth saving $20,000 in taxes on that money that I don't have to pay because I would be in a higher tax bracket when the tax cuts go away in 2 years? So in my opinion, that would be a good trade. But again, do the math. If you're going to bump yourself with a silly $7,000 Roth conversion or something like that, or a $5,000 Roth conversion, it's just enough to push you into a higher IRMA bracket. For example, going up from $174 a month and then heading up to the next bracket, which is typically they jump about $100 a year up to, you could actually increase your premiums by as much as $419. So your total premiums be just shy of $600,000, be about $590 a month just for your Medicare Part B. if you end up maxing out your income. Well, that still might be a good trade if you're going to save tens of thousands of dollars in taxes for the rest of your life. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that I really like about those people that are willing to plan early, that know that IRMA is a pesky problem that will hit them at age 65 when you get on Medicare. If you're still working, that's going to be a problem. Or if you're doing a lot of tax conversions to either roll money into a Roth IRA or roll money into LIRPs, life insurance retirement plans, which I believe are a lot more efficient and work better than Roths, as I've stated before. And you might be scratching your head thinking, wait a minute, how's that better than Roth? Well, come in and we'll explain it. I'll show you the math. It works a lot better. But the bottom line is you have to have after-tax money. When you roll the money to a Roth from an IRA, you pay tax on it as you roll it over. If you roll money to a LIRP, you have to pay taxes on the way out of your IRA to the LIRP. Or if you have already post-tax money that's just in a non-qualified or a non-IRA account, and you don't like the fact that, every year you get 1099s for the interest that the mutual funds make or the dividends you make or the interest you make, you can roll that money into LIRPs. And here's the cool thing about LIRPs that I love. I mentioned that tax-free interest on the municipal bonds, for example, still is calculated in your modified adjusted gross income. You know what else it does? It's also calculated on your Social Security provisional income amount and may cause your Social Security to be taxed at a higher level than if it wasn't counted. So municipal bond interest, as low as it pays, just because it's tax-free, typically doesn't help much. I'm really not a proponent of that as a tax fund. I like other things that are much more tax efficient and pay better, like the LIRP. Life insurance products actually are tax-free. But here's the coolest part, is you don't get a 1099 on them. You don't have to add any LIRP income. You could take 20 or 30 or 40. I have some clients taking over $100,000 out of their LIRPs every year because they did some planning before they were on Medicare. Now that they're on Medicare, they show maybe a gross income of $60,000 or $70,000. They pay very little in taxes, probably $5,000 or $6,000 in taxes, and they're living on close to $200,000 a year because they moved a whole bunch of money into LIRPs, and that money never shows up on a tax return. It's not included in their IRMA calculations, so they don't have to pay extra tax on Social Security. They don't have to pay extra on Medicare, and they don't have to pay the 25 or 30% tax bracket on the $100,000 or so that they're pulling out. Now, it might be that $10,000 or $20,000 is still an adequate amount to save, tax on 25% at a 25% bracket might still be worth it. You don't need big money to do a LIRP. Every little dollar of tax-free income might make a difference. So again, I love tax planning. You also have to keep in mind sometimes tax planning, if you're trying to aggressively get out of a future tax situation from the required minimum distributions, it may be smart actually to take a little extra hit on IRMA compared to the savings you get on taxes. But if you want to just keep kicking that can down the road, never take your taxable money out in your IRAs and you turn 73 and you all of a sudden now you have to take required minimum distributions out, and now you're in a place where you'll never not be in a higher Medicare Part B premium level because you didn't plan early. So I'd rather have maybe a few bad tax years and the rest of your life be good tax years with low Medicare premiums, rather than let's just make today's tax return as little as possible, pay as little tax as we can, but then the rest of your life ends up, you get smacked upside the head with higher Medicare premiums and higher taxes. So again, it's the overall picture of your income plan that we need to look at. And I'm glad you brought up the question about IRMA, because it is one part of the plan. It's not all about how much you make and how much your tax return says your gross income is. It's really, the bottom line is, how much do I get to keep? How much do I get to spend? How much do you get to keep and how much do you get to spend? And how much less could you send the government, who we know waste your money, where you could keep it in your family, your community, and spend it yourself? And that's really where it comes down to making a long-term overall plan. But keeping in mind the IRMA is a key factor of that plan. We have to know how it affects you either now or later.
Doug, thanks for listening to us in Mesquite Ranch. And of course, we'll be sending you out Jeff's book, Retirement, The Road Ahead. Okay, Jeff, next question here is Susan in Houghton. And Susan writes, I have many mature EE savings bonds that I inherited from my mother as her pay-on-death beneficiary. They total about $70,000. I've been redeeming a few every year to avoid paying a large amount of taxes at one time. What should I do if I want to redeem them now and pay the tax, or have it withheld and not wait until I file my tax return in April?
It's just really a personal matter. I agree that, if you take them out just little at a time so you can stay in a lower tax bracket might be the most efficient. But if you've got a big debt you want to pay off or something, maybe a balloon payment, or you've got a variable rate mortgage or something like that that's going to go to a higher level, and you just say, you know what, I'd rather just take the 70 out, pay the taxes, and pay down the debt, then pay the taxes. Waiting from now to April, I don't think the interest on that's going to be a lot if you can make money on your money. If you know that it's just going to go to pay off a debt and you don't want to, get dinged with, interest from, failure to pay, maybe you want to have the taxes withheld on the amount that you owe in taxes. It doesn't look like it's going to be a severe tax problem either way, and it's not like you're going to lose a ton either way. You're going to pay the taxes one way or the other. So it really just depends on you. Do you have a use that you could, use the money and make some interest on it, or save yourself from paying interest if you pay something off early rather than, waiting to April to pay taxes? It might be smarter just to pay the taxes now and have them withheld. But if you could earn money or save interest on that money, then just do the math. See if it makes more sense to wait to April and pay it. Or you could always do an end of the year quarterly tax deposit just at the end of the year as if you made all your money that quarter. The IRS, to my knowledge, hasn't audited back and say, oh, did you have the withholdings in February when you took the money, or in March or April or October or December? As long as you pay it before the end of the year and they have a 1099 or they have information that you've made those tax payments, you could just cash it in, have no withholdings, pay it as a fourth quarter quarterly tax deposit and probably not worry about it. That would be my take. That's what I would do. Now I could be disputed by a CPA, so I'm not giving you legal tax advice. I'm just telling you what I would do.
Susan, thanks for listening to us there in Houghton. And, of course, thanks for that question. You'll get Jeff's book, Retirement, The Road Ahead. Our next question, Jeff Jan, listening to us in Oro Valley. And Jan writes, I'm a single woman with no children, turning 63 this year. But my family has longevity, so I'm using 100 years old as my life expectancy mark for retirement planning. I have a combined portfolio of $200,000 and a 5% money market, $1.4 million in stocks and a 401k, mostly dividend stocks, and a Roth. I just purchased a $200,000 annuity for security. I expect my expenses to be around $100,000 a year in retirement. Should I convert some of my savings into a Roth and take the tax hit now? Also, at what age could I retire worry-free?
Well, depending on your Social Security and pensions, $100,000 a year might be a little rich on $1.4 million if you have it all in the stock market. I don't think $200,000 in an annuity for security and $200,000 in a money market, which probably isn't going to maintain at 5% much longer, is enough safe money to count on. I mean, if you're living on $100,000 a year, you could burn through that in 4 years. The last time the market took a 50% hit, 1.4 million could go to 700,000. You could spend the other 400,000. And, if you have some stocks like the Magnificent Seven and the NASDAQ stuff that, in 2000 corrected 80%, let's just say you don't go down. That index took 14 years to get back. So let's just say you burn through the 400,000 safe money over the next, few years, depending on when you're going to take Social Security. Now, if you have Social Security offsetting it by, let's say 30,000, maybe you're only spending 70 a year. I mean, you're still burning through all your safe stuff in 5 years, and you have to make sure that the stock market's back to even in order to support you. The stock market has a rule of thumb of 4%, a 4% rule because of volatility. If you're going to try to live to 100, that's almost 40 more years. You need to take that into consideration because in the next 40 years, you'll probably have 4 significant market crashes. That's just history. About every 10 years, there's a good one. Now, in 2000 to 2010, we had 2 good ones, a really good one in 2000 and a pretty really good one in 2008. The money printing kind of pushed off the next correction to about 2018. There was about a 25% correction, and they stimulated us out of that one. I don't know how many times we can use that trick, but we also did it through COVID. We did another one in 2022 when the market was down, but we haven't had the big crashes. But keep in mind, even bonds can go down. If interest rates are going up, bonds go down. You're probably, if you look at your bond holdings, you're probably down 20% still on most of those bond holdings, even though the stock market may have come back. And depending on how you're investing and how much risk you're taking, I wouldn't say that, once you're trying to start living on your investments, you need to get rid of volatility. So I think, just converting to a Roth and paying taxes now, let's just say you converted Roth to the next couple of years and just paid 30%. You probably pay more like 40% in taxes. Let's just say you take the tax hit now. You'd be in a 40% tax. Let's just say you end up with $1 million. And now you've got a Roth, but the Roth goes down 50%. And over the next 5 years, it comes back to, let's say, 800,000. But because you have expenses, you have to spend the 400,000 that you have just to live. Okay, $700,000 left with the market risk, even without paying taxes, means 4% of that might be $28,000 or $30,000 a year is all you can live on. So if you want to live on 100,000, you need to principal protect big time. And that's the thing Wall Street won't tell you. Yeah, but the stock market averages 10%. So if you got 1.4 million, don't worry about it. It'll always come back and you should be able to spend 100,000, no problem. Well, I'll tell you the story about Norm again, because I have before. He's an Intel guy that made a ton of money as an engineer back in the 90s, retired with $1 million. The market crashed, and because he had a $40,000 or $50,000 lifestyle need, his broker said, "You got $1 million, man. If that stock market average is 10, that means you could spend 100." Well, he was only able to spend 40,000. He still was on track to run out of money 10 years later because he was spending the money when the market went down, and as the market came back, he was still spending money, and it didn't come all the way back for almost 14 years on the high-tech stuff. And in the meantime, he was spending money at a loss. So he locked in losses that never came back. So, if you want to take $1 million of that at age 63, let's say in 5 years, you could guarantee an income of $80,000 a year just on that. You'd have no risk, and you could still put maybe $400,000 in something that's relatively risky and still know that your money's going to be safe. Now, I wouldn't say the $1 million goes in bonds. You need to do some principal protected account. I like fixed index annuities with income riders, and the income plan, especially if you think you're going to live to 100. Most of these companies think they only have to cover themselves and make sure that they have enough money to last you till maybe 85 or 90, because that's typical life expectancy. If you're going to live longer than that, let the insurance company take a risk on paying you the $80,000 or $90,000 a year that you need over and above your Social Security net of taxes to let you live on $100,000 a year. You'll still have safe money in the bank. You'll still have the other annuity for safety just as a fallback position. Maybe it's your nest egg for Medicare or Medicaid or a long-term care or something like that. And you still have $500,000 or $600,000 liquid, and you still have your income needs met. I think going into retirement, you have way too much risk if it's in stocks, even if it's in a 401k, mostly dividend stocks. I don't care. Dividend stocks, guess what? Dividend stocks in a downturn, every recession, look at dividend stocks. They've all gone down more than most regular stocks. They actually get hit harder in most recessions. So again, if you're actually spending the money, not just living on dividends. By the way, if you had a 3 or 4% dividend, you're only looking at $30,000 or $40,000 in dividends. And by the way, if there's a recession, those dividends can change. They don't always have to keep paying you. Maybe they're paying a 4% dividend now, but if their stock gets cut in half, you'll think, oh, well, I'll make 8% dividend. Not necessarily. If the stock's in half, the company's struggling, and maybe they're going to lower it to 4% again on half the money. So your dividends might actually go down on to a similar amount that the $1.4 million might go down. So don't rest your laurels on dividend stocks. It's kind of an old school theory that honestly doesn't work in the real world, especially doesn't work unless you have tons more money than you need. Like if you got a pension, Social Security covering all your bills and making you the $100,000, then keep them in dividend stocks. Let it ride out and take the dividends as a nice little, bonus on the growth to kind of, mitigate what you feel is a risky portfolio. But, don't put all your faith in a dividend stock, because dividend stocks go up and down. And if you have to spend that money, you're going to be selling it. You have to sell some stock. You can't live just on dividends. You will probably be spending that down. So again, take a closer look at your overall risk profile. I like the idea that you're thinking about doing a tax plan now, paying taxes now. I think maybe a wiser choice would be moving half of your net worth over and above what you lock income in to a LERP or something like that, and do it over a period of maybe 5 years, keeping your taxes in the 20% something range rather than going to a 30 or 40% tax bracket one time, because that money, once you've paid it in taxes, never comes back to you. That's money gone. And the IRS, and believe me, it's gone. The government blows it on stupid stuff. Typically, that doesn't even come back to you, affect you much anyway. So again, that's my take. Look at your overall picture. If you're 63, you need to be talking about paring down your risk, taking profits. You've had a great decade or two behind you, at least a decade and a half. That's been pretty good to you. You never get hurt taking profits. You're in a position that if you don't lose money, that $100,000 is easy to guarantee, but not in the market. There is no guarantee. And I would venture to guess if you're 100 and you go through a few market crashes, you will run out of money based on your portfolio allocation right now.
Jan, thanks for listening to us in Oro Valley. And of course, we'll send you out Jeff's book, Retirement: The Road Ahead. And give us a call here. Sit down with Jeff and ask your question, 520-780-9059. Of course, we're offering that opportunity to anyone listening to the program today. If you'd like to have a personal consultation with Jeff, it is a casual conversation, certainly to get the questions answered that you need the answers to ensure that you will have a confident retirement. Again, no cost, no obligation, no judgment. 520-780-9059, 520-780-9059. We call it the Retirement Roadmap, and you can call that number this weekend. Leave your name and number. Shelley will call you back during the week. Again, 520-780-9059. You can find out more about us online at premret.com, premret.com. Jeff, the new year is a pretty popular time, I think, to set financial goals, but I think now is the ideal time to check how you're doing. So let's talk about some tweaks that could make a difference. These are some tasks to finish 2024 strong. The first one would be to maximize tax-free opportunities here 6 months before the end of the year. What are some of the tax opportunities that people want to maximize right now?
Well, I think you need to look at, there's a couple of things that probably your CPA won't tell you. I could probably get into a few different tax strategies, but one of the things is to always maximize the tax bracket you're in, meaning let's say, the tax bracket, the adjusted tax bracket is around $90,000 to stay in the 12% range. okay, what if your taxable income is 70? Well, if you want to pay 12%, and knowing that you have $1 million in savings in an IRA that you have to pull out someday is either going to be taxed at 15 or 25% or higher, at least move that $20,000 at 12% over to a Roth, or even, look at funding LERPs, or even spending it or giving it away to your kids, or putting a scholarship fund aside to send some grandkids to school or something. But, maximize your tax bracket you're in. And by the way, the 12%, if you're already in the 22% bracket, where you can, 200,000 plus in taxable income and still only pay 22% in it, you can earn a little over $400,000 and still only pay tax at 24%. If the Trump tax cuts go away as planned, depending on what kind of a rate adjustment they give for inflation, they sunset back to the old tax brackets. The old tax bracket, before they changed, the 25% tax bracket started at about $75,000 in taxable income. Now it might come back around 90 now, but wouldn't you rather pay tax at 24% now rather than 25 or 30 later? And by the way, I think the tax brackets will probably go up in the future. I mean, Trump only has, if he gets elected, only has one 4-year period left. And I don't know, how much he can instill as permanent. I think in the future, just because math dictates that most politicians would say they have to raise taxes. So I think we're in probably the best tax brackets we'll ever be in. I don't see them going down. I don't know how they can go down. Nobody's really talking about lowering them. Trump might in some ways, but they just find ways to squeeze extra dollars out of us so the government can, squander our money. I think that's going to happen in the future. So if you pay taxes now and you put it in something safe, I like LERPs, even Roth conversions, you can't do LERPs. That's LERPs, life insurance retirement plans. That's using the tax benefits of life insurance, the safety features of what insurance companies can do to your money. They principal protect. They give you index-related returns without risk and can do it in a tax-free environment. There's nothing wrong with it. They call it the rich man's Roth for a reason. Rich people use it all the time. I mean, banks, executives, people with huge money use it all the time. You'd be surprised how much insurance product banks own compared to even their own treasury stock. They like tax-free income. So do normal people. But most normal people, I say, the people that aren't, making millions a year or have tens of millions of dollars in net worth can use this stuff too. Just a normal middle-class person that wants some tax-free income, whether it's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, or $100,000 in tax-free income retirement, can convert assets, pay taxes now at 12, 20, or 22%, and then not pay taxes on that money in the future. It will also, as I mentioned during the question and answer period a little bit ago, that it might also save you from having those increases on your IRMA or your brackets on your Medicare premiums too. So again, look at your overall picture, do as much tax planning as you can. You can do donor advised funds where you can pre-gift to charities in advance and get a bigger tax deduction this year than you would by just giving, let's say, $10,000 to your church and letting it be eaten up by your standard deduction and not getting a deduction for it. You can actually front load charitable deductions through a donor advised fund where it's your own charity, and you can take advantage of that. That's one thing. Sometimes people would double up in order to get a tax deduction, maybe doubled up charity deductions one year, like they'll pay, next year's on December 31st as well to get a tax deduction, but they've already taken care of their charitable contributions for the following year. So now they don't have to pay it and they can take a deduction on the entire standard deduction and maybe save a few $1,000s in taxes that way. Again, overall picture is something that Wall Street companies and most financial advisors really don't look at. We have to consider taxes. We have to consider, all the different things that are costing you money or keeping you from keeping and spending that money on your own. And if we can eliminate some of those things by just careful planning and looking at the big picture, you'll be better off. And again, tax planning is a lot bigger than just, one idea. I'm giving you a couple, but it is really about looking at your entire situation and just find out where we can pare back or just what tweaks we can make to pare back the taxes you spend and the money you keep.
We're talking with Jeff Hogan here of Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management about some financial tasks to finish 2024 strong. Jeff, in the few minutes that we have left here, what are some of the other things that you would suggest that people do right now, not wait until the end of the year here to maximize tax opportunities here this year?
Well, one thing that's on my mind, and I have had several appointments just recently saying, but I got this stock and I made so much money in it. I'll just use one example, Starbucks. I think it's down about 28% from its high. I think that's just this year. But, somebody that's, bought Starbucks 15 years ago and at $50,000 and it was at $500,000. And now it's only at $350. Says, yeah, but I can't sell it. I have to pay taxes. But wait a minute, you just lost 30% just in valuation. So I'm going to use that example to say, you never get hurt taking profits. This stock market is unreal as far as the historical valuations and where it's at. We see the head of NVIDIA just sold, I think it was about $120 million of his own stock. Why would he do that if he thought it was still going up? Why did Jeff Bezos sell $1.2 billion of Amazon stock if he thought it was still going up? Why did Zuckerberg earlier this year, I think he sold 2 tranches of $80 million a piece or something like that. Maybe I think he's up to like $500 million, and I got to double check that. But hundreds of millions of dollars in stock have been sold by insiders. Why are they selling their stock if they still think it has upside? It's extremely overvalued.
Jeff, once again, I hate to cut you off, but we're running a little short of time this week. Again, if Jeff's thoughts resonate with you, you'd like to get in and sit down and talk to him with a casual conversation, you want your Premier Retirement Roadmap, 520-780-9059 is the number to call. Do that this weekend, 520-780-9059. Find out more about us online at primrat.com. As I said, Jeff, out of time for this week. Thanks for your time, but most importantly, I want to thank our listeners for joining us. For Jeff Hogan, I'm Jeff Shade. Have a great weekend. Talk to you next week with another edition of Premier Retirement right here on 790 KNST, Tucson's most stimulating talk.
Investment advisory services provided through Premier Wealth Advisors, LLC, an Arizona state-registered investment advisor. Securities transactions are placed through TD Ameritrade. Insurance and annuity products are offered through Premier Advantage, Inc., DBA Premier Retirement Planning and Wealth Management. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any reference to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying abilities of the insurance carrier. The show is intended for informational purposes only and is not to be construed as advice or recommendations. Due to show format, accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Premier Retirement and its representatives do not provide legal or tax advice and may only conduct business with residents of states and jurisdictions where they're properly registered.